Back to the Future creator Bob Gale told me why the franchise will never return to screen on his watch. Will there be a Back to the Future movie screen, sequel, or even a reboot? Everyone else is doing it. Why not you?
We've got class.
And why he fears it will probably still happen anyway.
At some point, the movie will be in public domain, and, maybe some Chinese company will make it. Don't do it. Leave it alone. They remade Ben-Hur, one of the stupidest ideas ever conceived.
Chatting backstage at London Film and Comic Con, Bob also explained how he and Robert Zemeckis finally got Back to the Future made after getting knocked back more than 40 times. Greetings, Bob Gale. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
I want to start with some time travel, because it's what you do best. And
I do a lot of it, yes.
I would be honoured to time travel with you.
All right, let's try for it.
This is verbal time travel, just to be clear. Can you take me back to the time just before you met the man who would become your professional partner, Robert Zemeckis? How did you both meet originally?
We were classmates at the University of Southern California. We were both in the cinema school. This was in September of 1971. And at that time, the USC Cinema Department was sort of the bastard bad boy child of the university. We were headquartered in this ramshackle old shed, and we didn't get no respect from the administration. And 80% of our class of about 47, 48 kids was graduate students. Bob Zemeckis and I were undergrads, and the undergrads all kind of gravitated towards each other because we didn't have this veneer of educated malarkey. And we were all interested in Hollywood films, and the grad students were more interested in art films and were arguing about Truffaut and Godard, and we were arguing about Dirty Harry and James Bond.
And was it always going to be you on the writing and producing side and Robert on the writing and directing side?
Bob always wanted to be a director. I always wanted to be a writer. And before we even graduated, we started collaborating on a low-budget horror script called Bordello of Blood, which was made 17 years later. Lesson is don't throw anything away. So that was always the idea. I hadn't thought about becoming a producer until we finally started getting a movie made, and I realized, boy, I can't just walk away. I've got to be around. I've got to see what's going on. I got to make sure that any kind of decisions that are important to be made, I have some say in them. So I became a producer to protect the writing.
So you took one for the team, basically, to keep that creative control.
Exactly.
And with Back to the Future, who got in there first? Who planted that initial seed? Now, it's just you and me, Bob. You can tell me anything. Take the credit. Robert's not here.
He's not here, but he knows the answer. I was visiting my parents in St. Louis, Missouri in the summer of 1980. And puttering around in the cellar, I found my father's high school yearbook, which I'd never seen before. I attended the same high school that my dad had attended and discovered that he had been the president of his graduating class. I looked at this picture of my dad looking very proper and very political, if you will. And I thought to myself, boy, the president of my graduating class was this guy was a bozo. Was that the kind of guy that my dad was? One of these school spirit, rah-rah kind of guys that I couldn't stand? If I had gone to high school with my dad, would I have even been friends with him? And that's when the proverbial bolt of lightning struck me. And I said, now there's an idea for a movie. What if a kid ended up in high school with his dad? And I told this idea to Bob Zemeckis. So we just started cooking on this thing, and next thing we knew, we had this great idea for a movie.
So it was easy to sell Rob on it, but I think certainly from my experience anyway, but then I'm not very talented, it's quite rare to speak about how easy it was to get something commissioned. So how difficult was it to get Back to the Future over the line?
Well, this is what's interesting about it. When we worked out the story, enough of the story where we felt comfortable going into a studio to pitch it and hopefully get somebody to write a check for us to write it. This was Columbia Pictures. We just made a movie there called Used Cars. We pitched the idea, and the head of the studio, Frank Price, he loved the idea immediately. It was real clear. And I remember sitting in the room with him, And Bob wanted to keep telling him more scenes, and I kept elbowing him, like, shut up, shut up. He likes it. You know, you might jinx it if you tell him too much. So Frank loved the story. He loved the idea. He made the deal, and it was the easiest pitch meeting we'd ever had. And we wrote 2 drafts for Columbia, and they decided, well, no, it's really kind of nice and sweet, and we don't think those are the kind of comedies that people are interested these days. So they gave it back to us in what's called turnaround, which means that we got the chance to try to set it up with another company, another studio, on the basis that if somebody else was interested in it, Columbia would get their money back. Well, the studio did over 40 times.
Wow, 40.
Over 40. 42, 44, I don't remember exactly, but it was constant. It was, oh, well, it's a nice, sweet script, same excuse we heard.
Did you ever consider giving up?
Well, yeah, sure we did. I mean, Bob went off and he directed Romancing the Stone because we couldn't get this made, but we never totally thought we would give it up. It was just he needed to direct a movie. So he goes off and he makes Romancing the Stone, and it's a big hit, and everybody in town wants to be Bob's new best friend and wants to make his next movie, and the movie Bob wants to make is Back to the Future. So the one guy that had always liked the script was Steven Spielberg. We hadn't made the deal with Steven because our first 3 pictures had all been associated with Steven. I Want to Hold Your Hand, 1941, and Used Cars. None of them did well at the box office, and we were afraid that if we made another picture with Steven and it bombed, we'd never work again. And Steven understood that, and he basically said, yeah, you're probably right. I understand, but if you change your mind, let me know. So once Bob had a hit, we said, let's go back to the guy that always believed in the project. And we were the first movie that Steven set up under his new Amblin Entertainment banner at Universal.
Yeah, I've never heard of him, but I've heard of Amblin Entertainment. Yeah, very, very good production.
Well, you
company.
don't always get all the news over here, I understand.
My favorite production company, actually. Did you ever take any of these? I mean, the notes sounded pretty consistent in their tone and their subject. Did you ever take any of it on board, or did you stick to your original vision?
In the original drafts of the script, at the very end of the movie, the future had entirely changed, and people didn't like that. They felt very uncomfortable with that. So that was the one note that we heard a bunch of times that we said maybe we shouldn't change the world of the 1980s. He should come back to a world that is totally recognizable. Just certain things in his family would be different. So that was the only thing that we really changed. And then, of course, as we went into pre-production, things changed, as they always do. In the early drafts of the script, the time machine was built into an old refrigerator. And when we were in pre-production, Bob Zemeckis said, you know, having Doc Brown haul this refrigerator on the back of a pickup truck is a lot of logistics. Wouldn't it make more sense if he built it into a car? I said, yeah, that would be a good idea. And John DeLorean happened to be on trial at the time. This was in the summer of 1984. And Bob said, what if it was a DeLorean? We could do a gag with the gull-wing doors. So I wish I could take credit for thinking up that idea, but I didn't think it up. But I was smart enough to know what a good idea was when I heard one, and that's why we have a DeLorean.
Yeah, it seemed to work out. It seemed to be a popular choice 3 films later. Was that always the plan, at least in the back of your mind, to make a trilogy?
No, it was never a plan to make a trilogy. We had such a hard time getting the movie made to begin with. It never even occurred to us that there could ever be a second one. And as Bob Zemeckis has said many times, if we knew when we made the first one that there was going to be a second one, we would not have put Jennifer in the car at the very end.
Right.
Because when it came time for us to write the sequel, we said, what are we going to do with Jennifer? She's kind of a fourth wheel here. She doesn't really, it's everybody wants to see Doc and Marty. They don't really care about Doc, Marty, and Jennifer. So we finally decided to knock her out. And she's unconscious for most of the picture.
Christopher Lloyd, when he was asked about if he hadn't done the movies, what he would have missed the most, sort of imagining what was taken away from his life that he did get to experience thanks to the movies. He didn't talk about his time on set or meeting the fans afterwards. I'm sure he does enjoy that. He actually mentioned your great house parties, Bob Gale. He would miss those the most.
Well, that's why everybody wants an invitation to those parties.
Yeah, are these parties still a thing, and can I come to the next one?
The answer is yes, the parties are still a thing, although normally we always have the parties. Well, I shouldn't tell you when we always have them.
Probably
because
not,
then
no.
you'll show up.
I'm that kind of guy. You've read me quite well, Bob, in 20 minutes. So I'm still waiting for the answer.
We have the parties every year. It's an annual affair. And Chris comes whenever he's in town and can do it. And he always has the best time.
Does he have a plus one?
Yes, he's married.
Oh.
And his wife is wonderful.
I'll find a way. I will find a way to your party, Bob Gale. I have to ask a question that I know the answer to already, but I feel like it wouldn't be a legit Bob Gale interview if I didn't ask this question. So I'm going to ask the question. And the question is, will there be a Back to the Future movie screen sequel or even a reboot? Everyone else is doing it. Why not you?
We've got class. We're not doing it because the first three movies are great the way they are. Michael J. Fox really isn't in good enough shape to do a fourth picture. Who wants to see Back to the Future without Michael J. Fox? I certainly don't. We don't have another story to tell right now. Would we if we did? No. Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3 are products of their time. They hold up very, very well, and we don't see any reason to revisit them. And one of the reasons that we are doing Back to the Future the musical is that it is a way to revisit the story of the first movie in a different format that won't change anybody's perception of the franchise, but people will say, "Hey, that's a good idea. That's a perfect movie to turn into a stage musical. I want to go see that."
So something is sacred after all.
Something is sacred, yes.
So with remakes and what have you, do you hold the keys, the creative keys to Back to the Future for eternity? So without being too morbid, but one day in the future when, a terrible day when Bob Gale is no longer with us, could someone just come in and reboot it?
Who knows? I have no idea. I hope that won't happen. I hope that by the time we're dead, I don't know whether my daughter will be able to call the shots. She knows where I'm coming from, and she'll do everything she can to prevent that. Bob Zemeckis doesn't want it. He'll tell his kids the same thing. Steven Spielberg has been very respectful of our wishes, and he's still in that camp. At some point, will they decide to remake it? I don't know. They remade Ben-Hur. I mean, talk about one of the stupidest ideas ever conceived. Why would you do that? But somebody said, well, the book is in public domain, and it was. At some point, the movie will be in public domain, and maybe some Chinese company will make it.
You never know, but you're putting it on record here. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Leave it alone. And if you ever see somebody saying this is Back to the Future 4, rest assured it will not have the Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale seal of approval.
And how involved are you with the musical?
I'm all over it. I've written the book.
Yeah.
I'm one of the producers. I am totally on top of it. And that fact should make fans rest easy that Back to the Future, the musical, is going to be true to the spirit of the movie.
Bob Gale's quality control is all over that stage show,
that's
baby.
Exactly it. We expect it will transfer to London's West End. Exactly when and where hasn't been figured out yet, but that is the plan.
Bob Gale, thank you for talking to me.
You're welcome.
How was that for you?
I think we could do this again.
Yeah? At one of your parties?
We'll see.
Thanks, Bob. In part 2 of my interview with Bob, we talk predictions, fan theories, and Donald Biff Trump. Click on the link on your screen or in the video description for all of that. And don't forget to cyberlike this video if you real world liked it.